Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. We're once again going to be converting a former blog post into a podcast episode with some modifications along the way. This particular one was originally written back in January of 2021, so by the time this episode comes out, it will already be over 4 years old. With that in mind, I've left some bits of the text pretty much as they are because I found it funny that past me was talking about things in the recent past for him that are already about 5 years in the rearview mirror for me. So, I hope you enjoy, and I'll let the writings of past me take it from here. I just wanted to share something that I've recently been delving into a bit more thanks to my studies. Namely, the age of the Earth people commonly accepted before the theory of evolution as proposed by Darwin and Wallace in 1859. I thought it might give some idea of how big a shift in perspective would have been needed for the average person back in 1859. I thought it might give some idea of how big a shift in perspective would have been needed for the average person back in 1859, or at least when it comes to people accepting that the Earth was in fact billions of years old, irrespective of when exactly this happened. So, how old was the Earth commonly accepted to be? Well, it was mostly calculated using the generations and ages listed in the Bible. There's a YouTube video published in 2020 which uses this chronology to calculate that, if people use the text literally, the world would have been thought to have been created in 4163 BCE. Well, I tried to make my own version of this. The first book of the New Testament, the book of Matthew, has a family tree down to Jesus, which connects Abraham to Jesus himself. There are said to be 56 generations between Abraham and Jesus, although Joseph rather than Jesus is listed as Abraham's descendant. Regardless of the genealogical complexities at play here, the average time for a generation is about 30 years. So, extending this logically, the time between Abraham and Jesus would be about 56 times 30, meaning 1,680 years. From here, it's just a case of working backwards towards Adam and Eve. Using the ages people were when they had children, as listed in the 5th chapter of Genesis, the amount of time from Adam to Abraham spans 1,946 years. Added to our previous total, this gives us a grand total of 3,626 years. If we take Jesus as being born in 5 BCE, that would make Adam and Eve born in 3621 BCE. I know it's not quite the same figure as the video came to, but it's interesting to do the legwork for ourselves. Aside from these more literally minded Genesis-focused chronologies, there is also the Anno Mundi, or Year of the World chronology. This has the start of the world placed on the 1st of September 5509 BCE. The chronology that I think is most often cited, including, if I remember rightly, in Good Omens, is that of James Ussher, an Irish bishop. His specified date is 4004 BCE, which indicates a sort of consensus appears to be forming between these old thinkers that the Earth was perceived to be roughly 6,000 years old. Consider then the contrast between this number and the modern estimate for the age of the Earth, about 4.54 billion years. Now, the time period between the start of the world as given by Ussher and 1859 is 5,863 years. Let's make this number equivalent to 1 step, which I'm going to approximate as a meter for the sake of my calculations. To walk this new age of the Earth, in Ussher-sized steps let's call them, you would have to travel over 774 kilometers, very roughly speaking 484 miles. None of this is to say that the modern estimate of the Earth isn't correct. However, I find myself agreeing with the sentiment I saw expressed by Stephen Jay Gould. Namely, just because the old age of the Earth turned out to be wrong, it doesn't mean that we should deride the people behind these estimates for that fact. If nothing else, it shows how big a shift in perspective there would have been around about the time the ideas of evolution, etc. started floating around this time. That brings us to the end of today's episode. As always, thank you all for listening. Feel free to get in touch at the show's email address for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.